Hello, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. This is Chimera Elite, and today we're taking a look at the necromancers of the undead. The tier 1 costs 45 AP and is kind of your prototypical necromancer. He summons things and he makes them explode. Now, he costs 45 AP, 4 movement. He has a magic power of 2, meaning that he has a max mana reserve of 5 and he gets 2 mana points back a turn. Now, the interesting thing is his stats actually, they're not, like, obviously, he's a spellcaster. So his stats, other than his will, dodge, and parry, and toughness, don't matter as much as it does for, say, a fighter. But they still matter to some extent. His two abilities, or spells, Morbid Puppet Invocation, it costs 2 mana, so you can do this once every turn. It's pretty easy, has a range of 3, and just one thing to keep in mind, 1, the skeleton that you summon is extremely weak. It's insane how weak they are. They can be kind of annoying. They can just poke away an enemy. But not only that, but there's a max number of skeletons that you can summon, which is 2. So for every Dark Invoker you bring into the game, that's 2 possible undead units added into your army. Now, this is kind of where Morbid Explosion comes in, the blowing up part. You can only target skeleton type units, and what happens is the target skeleton just explodes. He's done. He's gone. And unlike the Sparkling's explosion, the Morbid Explosion hits every unit in contact with it. So if you're surrounded by enemy units, you can just pop this. The dude explodes. It has a range of 4, so you're somewhat out of the fight when you use this. And it hits with a force of 9, it's decent. Now his attributes are Living Dead, Fear 9. Living Dead immune to conventional fear effects other than Hyperion, which is just special to the Chimera, so that's the only hero or unit that you actually have to worry about. And you're immune to the effects of poison. Poison is not in the game, so obviously it's not anything that's dangerous to you right now. Fear 9, it's a fear of 9. It's really not much of anything. And also, he shouldn't be having to rely on Fear 9, on his fear ability, because that means he's engaged with the enemy. Admittedly, someone comes up to him and is feared, he has a better chance of getting away because their accuracy is decreased. Now, he also has recovery. So, what I told you earlier was actually wrong. He has a magic power of 2, right? And he gains back 2 mana points because of that. In reality, he gains back 3. I mean, I understand why they did this. They understood that, okay, giving him a more magic power would have to increase his mana reserve. But we don't want to do that because if you can build up a big enough mana reserve, let's say of 9, that's 2 Morbid Puppets in 1 turn. Followed immediately by Morbid Explosion. So you're literally just plopping down a skeleton, exploding him, popping down another skeleton. Little bit strange if you actually no, that's more than that. If my math is correct. Yeah. That's actually literally putting down a skeleton, exploding him, putting down another skeleton, exploding him. If you have your full 9 mana, because it's 2 to put down a skeleton, 3 to explode. Actually, my math is terrible. That's actually 10 mana, so you couldn't do that. But either way, just having 9 mana isn't a good idea. But what it does, it allows you to do one thing every turn. You can either summon or explode. And in my experience with the Dark Invoker, he's actually pretty good. I think he's okay. For my personal playstyle, which is somewhat on the aggressive side, if you've watched any of my videos. And you can't really be that aggressive when you have to wait for his mana to slowly build up, because so much can happen in one turn. And admittedly, the first turn is pretty much always just posturing and kind of wiggling around the map, trying to figure out where the enemy's weaknesses are, or waiting for a misstep. But still, having to wait 2 turns for 2 somewhat mediocre units that don't really add that much to the fight until you can just blow them up, which also broaches the problem of, okay then, they explode. What happens if your units are in the way? They also get hurt. Just a little something to keep in mind when you're choosing the Dark Invoker for your army. Now, the Tier 2 Henchman of Rot isn't so much a summoner as a support, and in the purest of senses. He debuffs and he heals. And he's 56 AP, which is decent. He has 3 movement, and he has the same magic power as the Tier 1. His dodge and toughness have both taken a hit, but his will is at a whopping 16, at match with the other extremely powerful units, such as the Chimera or the Archmage. Now, he does not have recovery. So you cannot cast his second ability, Respite of the Dead, every turn. You have to wait. And if you choose to cast Putrefaction, which costs 2 mana, as long as Putrefaction is in play, you're going to have to wait another 2 turns to actually even have the mana to cast Respite of the Dead. Now, you might be a little bit confused at this point, but here, let me explain what Putrefaction actually does. At the start of your turn, the enemy target suffers a -2 toughness penalty and then a damage of force 5. However, here's the thing. Putrefaction is a constant effect. It keeps on going, which means that something has to be powered, and you are the power source. Your Henchman of Rot is the power source. At the beginning of each turn, the magician who casts Putrefaction loses 1 mana, so the effect is continuously applied. And there is no limit to range or line of sight, so you can keep it on, you can just pop it on someone, and just forget about it. Now, this is a very, very big investment, and in the right situation, it could be very good, say against Melmoth or the Flesh Golem. It could be very, very useful. But still, you're spending 56 AP to toss my -2 toughness penalty and a damage of force 5. Just think about that and keep that in mind whenever you toss a Henchman of Rot in your army. Now, Respite of the Dead costs 3, has a range of 4, and you can only cast it on things that are living dead. The fighter recovers 10 health points if you succeed, but if the spell fails, the targeted fighter loses 10 health points. So it's a risk. It's a really big risk that I don't particularly like to force upon my units. I have the healer in my Wolfen army because of 2 things. 1, the fucker takes health from himself. He's literally taking blood out of him, putting it in the other guy. But it doesn't matter as much, because while the Henchman of Rot kind of stitches you back together and like, oh, whoops, my scalpel slipped. I messed up. Instead of healing you, I hurt you. Oh well. The Enchanter, the Wolfen Enchanter, if he fails, he takes the damage. The unit that's more important than him, that he's trying to support, doesn't. It also kind of helps that the unit whose health is being drained, possibly, obviously, has regeneration, which is the Wolf Enchanter. Admittedly, it might be okay to use Respite of the Dead on someone like Melmoth, who actually does have regeneration. But still, losing 10 health points is not fun, and it's a big risk that I personally just don't like taking. The Henchman of Rot is okay, but he's unfortunately somewhat situational, and I hate things that are situational because of how they set up the new game modes. You press play, you are tossed into a random match in a random place against a random army. You have no idea what you're facing, and having a specialized army that can only face one thing is in no way a good idea. Now, the Tier 3 Master Necromancer is a totally different story from the Tier 1 and the Tier 2. He's 75 AP, he has 3 movement, and his magic power is 3. Meaning he has a max mana reserve of 9, and he gets 3 mana points per turn. Now, what this means is that he can cast 2 of his 3 spells every single turn. Primal Attack of Darkness, which is the only actually directed straight damage spell that the undead have. It costs 3, it's really easy to cast, range of 4, and Eruption of Raw Darkness hits the enemy, and they suffer an injury, or a force, of 10. He has the same Morbid Puppet invocation as the Tier 1. I think it would be kind of cool if they somehow made the puppets stronger depending on the will of their caster, but that's a whole nother theory crafting. And his last ability, which fortunately costs 5 and does not actually, and cannot be cast like multiple times a turn, is called Wave of Death. It costs 5, it's somewhat harder to cast at a difficulty of 12, but it has a range of 8, and the enemy target suffers an injury whose force is equal to 12 plus the number of living dead allies within 4 hexagons around the magician at the moment of incantation. So if you wait 2 turns, this guy is up to 6 mana, and you are surrounded. You are in the middle of your entire undead army. And let's say you have another 2 necromancers for whatever reason. You are completely surrounded by undead. You're going to be able to hit them as hard or harder than a celestial scourge. Just let that sink in for a little bit. And also, keep in mind, along with his Living Dead and Fear attributes, he has something called Focus, meaning that the damage of all of his spells is increased by 3. Meaning it's not 12 plus the number of Living Dead allies around the caster, it's 15 plus the number of Living Dead. So you only need 6 undead around you to deal as much damage as a Celestial Scourge. My army is small. I have 6 units in my army. I am an outlier in that. Most undead armies have a bunch more skeletons than I do, and you just know, like, having that few units is weird. I'm weird. I've seen undead armies that go up to 9 units. 9 or 10 units. If you have one of those armies surrounding this guy and he uses a Wave of Death, let's say on your hero, on Cillian, she's essentially out of the fight. You might not kill her, but you're going to get her pretty damn close to dying. And either way, next turn, he can just get a little bit closer and slap her with a Primal Attack of Darkness. You're set. That's how much damage this Necromancer can pour out. Now, admittedly, he's a bit expensive. He's 75 AP. But used correctly, and I have used him a little bit in the past, um, he's pretty damn good. All the necromancers really are, except for the tier 2, who I'm still a little bit iffy on because he's so situational. But even then, I think most of the undead necromancers actually have a pretty solid place in the Ram army as it is right now. Now, if you'll notice in the background, the gameplay that's been going on is actually kind of an older gameplay. I'm still using Kain. I still have my Master of the Veil, and it's actually up against another Guardian of Equilibrium Wolfen player. Now, in my previous video, I talked a little bit about what would happen if I just tried rushing them. Now, I tried rushing them in this video a bit more. It worked a little bit better. I still lost, but it worked. Now, had I had another paladin, and a ranged unit, an archer, probably tier 1, I might have actually been able to pull this one off. And I've stopped using the Master of the Veil just because it kind of conflicts with my overall strategy. And just, I'm gonna run up to you and beat the living crap out of you. I'm gonna do it well too, for the most part. But having a unit that decent players are aware of and just simply stay away from doesn't really appeal all that much to me. It probably also has a lot to do with the simple fact that I have been on maps where I cannot get into the right position, probably because I'm just not good enough. I'm just not at that point yet. But I've just kind of had a little bit of a falling out with the Master of the Veil, and I've switched him out now with another paladin and with an archer. So yeah, that's what's going on right now. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll see you all next time when we will be looking at the gargoyles. Peace.